before we started. So let's load up this. There we go. So as you all know, we're colouring the margins, but we're actually part of a wider programme called Back from the Brink, and it's one of the most ambitious conservation projects that was been undertaken and funded by the lottery, with the aim to save 20 species from extinction and to benefit over 200 more. And we were doing this through 12 single species projects and 7 integrated projects. There were 19 overall happening over the whole of England, and we've got our map there on the right hand side, my right hand side, and number 2 is our project and the different areas that we were covering. So we've had lots and lots of partners for all these projects, and we are from Plantlife and RSPB for Colouring the Margins. We've had other partners from Natural England, Bug Life, Bumblebee Bee Conservation, and lots of others. So it's been really great to work with the huge array of organisations on this project. And of course, we need to mention the funders. So we've had funding from 9 different people, 9 different organisations, which has been really beneficial for the project. But what you're all here for is our project for Colouring the Margins. So you're all volunteers or landowners or farmers from our main key areas that we've been working in, all the way from Yorkshire and the Brecks all the way down to Cornwall and South Devon. So we really appreciate you all coming together this evening and working on the project with us. So the main reason that Colouring the Margins was started is the fact that arable plants are the fastest declining suite of plants in the UK. And this species you can see here is interrupted brome. And I find it quite interesting with the story behind it, the fact that it is native here in England, but you can't find it anywhere else in the world. Apart from a couple of records in the 1930s, it's never been found outside of England. It declined really, really rapidly in the 1970s until one site remained. And then in 1972, it just disappeared completely, until a university lecturer that was actually, who had collected some seed and was doing some own research on it for his own studies, had that last remaining seed. And since then, the captive population for this plant, that seed basis has been the population for all subsequent conservation attempts on this species. And one of those sites was at Ranscombe Farm, one of Plantlife reserves, where we're trying to re-establish wild populations of interrupted brome. So it's species like this and 9 others that are why it is important for us to work with and to save arable plant species, because one, they're incredibly fascinating and the stories behind them, but they also create areas teeming with pollinators, which in turn increase the crop production. They provide a reservoir of invertebrates that could facilitate integrated pest control. They're vital food sources for small mammals, bats, beetles, and of course they protect important nesting habitat for many declining farmland birds. So the project itself was focusing on 10 species, which are all here, all here in front of you. But tonight we'll be hearing from our field advisors, who just introduced themselves, who will be telling you about the successes they've had in the areas that they've worked in. But first, we've got a little quiz for you. It's only 4 questions. We just thought we'd see how successful you thought our project would be. So if you'd like to jot down your answer to how many farms have we worked with, and we will touch on the answers at the end of the presentation this evening. So how many farms do you think we've worked with? Is it A, 105, B, 75, or C, 65? And I'll scroll to the next one in a second. Okay, number 2. So how many volunteers have helped us over this project? Have we got A, 83, B, 100, or C, 68? Okay, number 3. Ooh, technology. How many reintroductions have we done? Is it A, 25, B, 34, or C, 37? And our last question is, how many seeds have we sown? Is it 455,000, 775,000, or 815,000? So we will come back to those questions at the end. But for now, let's speak to who we're going to first, Rob, and find out all about his stuff in his area. Now let me see how to do this. There you go, Rob. I'll pass over to you.
Can you see that all right, Zoe? If you're muted. Hopefully you can all see that. Can you see that?
See. No, can't
yeah.
see. Do you want me to show it on mine, Rob?
It should be okay. 2 minutes.
Okay. There we go. Yeah.
See that, everyone? Yeah.
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 Cool, brilliant. Right, thanks, Zoe. Yeah, so I'm going to sort of quickly go through a bit of a roundup of the work that we've been doing in the Wessex area over the last 3 years. So the Wessex area really, for the purposes of colour in the margins, really just applies to Wiltshire and Hampshire mainly. Those are the two counties that we spent the majority of the time working in, and we're really lucky actually to work in those areas because it's such a great area for arable plants, and especially the suite of species that we as a project have been looking at. So of those 10 critically endangered species that Zoe showed you on the slide earlier, 6 of those can be found in Wiltshire and Hampshire alone. So we've been really lucky to work in those two counties, and this shot of pheasant's eye was taken at a site in Wiltshire. So we know we're really lucky to have the species that we have in this area, and that's probably largely thanks to the sort of the chalkier soils and the free draining soils. I should say that those species include things like pheasant's eye, obviously, as you just saw, red hemp nettle, corn buttercup, spreading hedge parsley, broad-fruited corn salad, and broadleaf cudweed, so quite a few. But it's not only those sort of priority species that we're working with. Over the course of the 3 years, we found a load of other really important arable plant species, like this sort of sad-looking corn marigold, but also things like night flowering catchfly and Venus's looking glass and field Cromwell, narrow-fruited corn salad. The list is sort of endless. There's been some really fantastic plants found whilst doing survey work over the last 3 years. So the majority of the work was survey work, and 35 proper surveys were carried out over the last 3 years, and those surveys range from everything from species population level, so just surveys within quadrats, all the way up to farm scale inventory surveys. And as some of you will probably know, a lot of the farms in Wiltshire and Hampshire can be absolutely ginormous. I'd imagine that some of the farms from Devon and Cornwall might well inside the field. Having a volunteer input to help with those surveys was absolutely brilliant. It's really invaluable. We've worked intensively with 15 different farms across those two counties, although we've probably had indirect contact with a couple of hundred different farms through my work with the RSPB, providing advisory assistance. So whilst 15 farms had quite an intensive provision of advice, there's been absolutely loads of farms that we've worked with through events and online. Another big part of the work we've been doing has been reintroduction work. obviously Hannah and Ali have been doing that as well. We have carried out 4 reintroductions of both pheasant's eye and red hemp nettle in the Wessex area. And had success from all of those reintroductions. So 65,000 seeds were sown in Wessex, were hand broadcast in Wessex with the help of volunteers. And this picture of pheasant's eye is one of one that germinated after a reintroduction the following year. So that's been absolutely brilliant, because I think I'm right in saying that the reintroduction of a lot of these species is not really been done that much. It's a bit trial and error. So we were really grateful to the farmers that we worked with, who agreed to let us do this, and also to look after the population into the future. And it's really fantastic to see species like pheasant's eye, which have quite a poor germination rate, doing well after the reintroduction initiatives. It's not just landowners that we've worked with. This is John Glenn, MP for Salisbury, helping me do some reintroduction work in Wiltshire. He's actually the species champion for pheasant's eye. So it's a really invaluable opportunity for us to promote the plight of these species to him, to take to sort of local government level and hopefully beyond. It was really good for him to be able to see what we do, and hopefully that will help help into the future of agriculture. We've had lots of events across the whole project. In Wessex we had 9 colour in the margins events, and those range from everything from Open Farm Sunday to sort of more technical workshops for farmers and advisors. We were present at agronomy events, and I gave talks to local botanical societies and recorders forums, and we even had the RSPB Council come down to see some work that we've been doing. So we've really got to reach a broad audience, and again, volunteers have been absolutely essential in helping me set that up. That's been really fantastic. I thought I'd just include these slides quickly, just to say that it's not all been. We've actually found out some really interesting bits and bobs over the course of the project. The picture on the left is of some spreading hedge parsley that a volunteer found growing in a road verge, a very steep road verge. We think that population of spreading hedge parsley is only present there because of the sort of minimal soil disturbance provided by passing vehicles. So it's not all the sort of the usual farmland setting that I've actually been doing a bit of work away from that in the Wessex area, and that's been really interesting because I've been learning a lot as well. The picture on the right is of colour variation in Venus's looking glass. The site that this was found at actually was very interesting because a lot of the plants we found, including things like Scarlet Pimpernel, were also this sort of colour form. They were very, very pale. So it's been a really interesting process, finding things we weren't expecting. There's been lots of interesting discoveries over the last few years. I had to include some stone curlews in this presentation because they are the species that I've been working on alongside the arable plant work, and they are a really good example of how the conservation work that we've been doing for arable plants has been mutually beneficial for another species. So for those of you that don't know, I'm sure some of you actually, some of the farmers amongst you might actually have stone curlews on your holding. The main conservation tool for stone curlews on farmland is for farms to provide a cultivated plot, a fallow plot, usually about 2 hectares in size, to provide suitable nesting ground for these birds, and that is also used for things like lapwing as well. And those plots are invaluable for arable plants because they provide a safe haven within maybe a cropped environment, for example, where a lot of the species we've been talking about, things like red hemp nettle, can often be present. And so over the last 3 years, I've often in Wiltshire and Hampshire especially been able to provide mutually beneficial, or I've been able to provide conservation advice for stone curlews, which simultaneously can help preserve arable plants, because the preparation of these plots in the spring can often be really fantastic for species like red hemp nettle. So that's been really interesting as well as part of this project. And lastly, I thought I'd just include this shot because it's nice, and there's some red hemp nettle. It's a good example of how volunteers have been absolutely essential to this work. We held a seed collection day at an estate on the Wiltshire-Hampshire border way back in 2018. And we had a good team of 10 to 15 volunteers help me collect red hemp nettle seed in the autumn, and that seed went away to Kew, the Millennium Seed Bank in Kew, and they grew that seed on, and that seed was then used in reintroduction initiatives last year. So that local seed was collected by volunteers, and then those same volunteers helped me sow the seed for reintroduction projects. And in this case, there were over 60 plants to show the following year. So it's been, it's come full circle, and it's been fantastic. So that's a real whistle-stop tour through 3 years of colouring the margins in Wessex. But please do let me know if you've got any questions.
Does anybody have any questions at all for Rob? If you do, you can unmute yourself and ask away. If not, we'll have time for questions at the end as well.
Let's see if I can.
Nope. Okay. Rob, can you stop sharing your screen, and then Hannah?
I've got
Ali.
Do you think there's any particular reasoning as to why that?
We don't know, but we took a soil sample which we sent away. But apparently it's been they've been like that for some time, the plants there. I honestly can't say why that is, and some of you might actually be able to answer that for me. I don't know, but I thought it was really interesting that it applied to several different species in a very select area. So I assume it's got something to do with that one spot. But I can't answer that. No, don't.
Have you collected seed and tried to grow it somewhere else?
Well, yeah. So we, as part of the reintroduction work we've been doing, we have collected seed from a naturally occurring population of red hemp nettle, and we have reintroduced the seed at a farm in a close proximity to that.
No, sorry, I mean of these white forms of.
Oh, sorry. No, we haven't collected any seed from those.
I think I'd be interested to see that. I'd also like to know the history of that, some aspects of the history of that field in terms of cropping and possible pesticide use too.
Yeah, we did think about chemical use and whether that had anything to do with it, but I think that farm is that particular field is managed organically.
Okay.
Hopefully.
So I think we need to collect some seed and try and relocate it to see whether this is a permanent or not.
Yeah.
And will happen elsewhere.
Yeah.
Good question.
Somebody's got a question on the chat, Zoe.
Yeah, let's have a look. What has been done on the farms where the reintroductions were done to ensure longevity of those species? So in terms of management plans, maybe?
Yeah, so where reintroductions have taken place, there are management plans in place to ensure that the landowner is capable of carrying out long-term management for that particular species. So we're trying to ensure that the reintroduced population is looked after well into the future. I don't know if that answers the question.
Cool. I think don't see any more questions in the chat. So Ali, I didn't know if you wanted to go.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, let's see how successfully I can share my screen. Bear with me a second, folks. When I started the project, I was much more familiar with clay soils. I live in Wiltshire. Working in Somerset was much more familiar for me. Hadn't spent much time in the North Downs at all, so when I got there, it was all very different for me. But it's been really lovely to work in two such different areas with such a contrasting kind of soils and suite of plants, actually. So I thought I'd start by kind of going through Somerset. So in Somerset, my target species was really spreading hedge parsley, a plant that I have come to love, but has been a bit of a hard sell. It's probably the least exciting of our priority species in the way that it looks. It's also pretty small as well. It's not a big showy species, but I've come to love it. I love it very much, and I think I've gained a lot of support in that as well. We have a couple of corn buttercup sites in mid Somerset Hills as well, and one broad-fruited corn salad site. So this is kind of map showing you the areas that we've worked in. So we've worked on 20 farms in Somerset. 7 of those farms were found to have spreading hedge parsley, 3 corn buttercup, 1 with a broad-fruited corn salad, 1 surprise pheasant's eye finding, which we didn't expect in Somerset at all. That actually popped up in a really obscure site. It's a bit like Rob's spreading hedge parsley roachbird site. This was actually on a raised section adjacent to the King Sedgemoor drain. So we found it was actually found by some local botanists. We went along to check it out, and it was one extraordinarily big plant. Unfortunately, it didn't hang around in 2020. So when we checked back in 2020, it wasn't there at all. So we don't have an explanation for that one. And other sites where we haven't found our priority species, we have found secondary species in those sites as well. So we've got a couple of sites there, for instance, that have shepherd's needle as well. So North Downs is a bit of a mixed bag over in North Downs. So initially we were focusing on looking for pheasant's eye over in Kent and red hemp nettle in Surrey. But a couple of other interesting things turned up as well. I should say as well, we had very little success finding pheasant's eye in the North Downs. So I surveyed 10 farms and didn't find any, unfortunately, proving to be quite a tricky species for us over there. We surveyed many sites looking for red hemp nettle as well, and just the one site for red hemp nettle. However, we did have a nice finding of spreading hedge parsley, and we had a report of corn buttercup as well. It wasn't a site that I had been to. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to go there this year because of lockdown, but a nice finding by the Kent Botanical Recording Group. I just wanted to talk about some of the successes we've had as well. I'm really sorry for the poor quality of these photos. I realised that I'm a terrible photographer when I was putting this together. But this is just an example of where management advice that we've given to a landowner has just had fantastic success. So this is a site in Somerset. And you can see in 2019 there's virtually nothing of interest growing there. There were historical records of spreading hedge parsley on this site. And when we checked it in 2019, we found one little plant. You can see my quadrat with a lonely little spreading hedge parsley in there. Working with the landowner agreed to put in 2 cultivated uncropped plots. And when we visited in 2020, we had over 200 spreading hedge parsley plants pop up in these 2 plots. And you'll see by the other photos as well, we had a massive amount of shepherd's needle. So that was just a fantastic success. So it's really lovely how much this landowner really embraced this and decided to do this off his own back. Wasn't part of an agri-environment scheme, and was really pleased with the results himself. So it's a really lovely site. I've been really lucky as well to work quite a lot on 5 head arable fields, which is Triple SI in Somerset. It's owned by Somerset Wildlife Trust. Plantlife has had a working relationship with them in the past, but colour in the margins has really allowed us to spend more time there. And it's a great site to really learn more about these species. So at 5 head arable fields, we have spreading hedge parsley, corn buttercup, and broad-fruited corn salads of our priority species. There are some secondary species. There's lots of interesting species there. So if you haven't been, you should definitely visit. We've spent a lot of lovely time with volunteers here. Volunteers have been a massive help on this site, carrying out surveys, population surveys. We've been doing rapid assessment surveys to monitor the populations of arable plants here. And we've also done some seed collections here. And just to give you an idea of how interesting this site is for arable plants, in one of the fields in 2019, we counted, or we estimated, 17,000 corn buttercup, 2,500 spreading hedge parsley plants, and 6,000 broad-fruited corn salad. So that's like the highest numbers of those species over the time that we've spent here. So yeah, fantastic site. Must also say as well, this is not one of my photos, having just fessed up to being a terrible photographer. This was taken by Alex Hyde, who's a professional photographer for the Back from the Brink project. It's just beautiful. Spreading hedge parsley photo is mine. Not quite so good. I've also been really lucky to work at Langley Vale Wood, which is a woodland trust site in Surrey. It was purchased by the Woodland Trust in 2014, and it's a 260 hectare site, and they keep 40% of the site as open space. A proportion of that is managed purely for arable plants, and the fields are not cropped anymore, but they're cultivated but uncropped. And they've had real success with red hemp nettle on that site. So again, there were historical records of red hemp nettle there, but the management over the years hadn't been doing it too many favours. And the Woodland Trust took it on, and they put in appropriate management, and now we've seen the numbers really steadily increase. So it's a fantastic site. It's got a brilliant group of volunteers. And also it gave me some lovely other sightings of ground pine and catmint. So it's a lovely site to work on. Like Rob, we've been doing quite a few reintroductions over 2019, 2020. The majority of my reintroductions have actually taken place this year, so I don't have much to report on in the way of successes yet, but we are hopeful. So we had 10 reintroductions altogether, 4 spreading hedge parsley sites, 1 corn buttercup, 3 red hemp nettle, 1 broadleaved cudweed, and we also had a site with mixed species. So that was an Apex Park in Somerset, so a country park, and we put mixed species in there as a kind of showcase for the public, really. We've had, of the 3 sites that we did in 2019, we have had successes. So Apex Park, we sowed a variety of species there, corn buttercup, spreading hedge parsley, broad-fruited corn salad, and we've had success with spreading hedge parsley, not the other 2 that I mentioned. However, other species have popped up as well, things like shepherd's needle and stinking chamomile. So it's a really nice place to show the public to learn a bit about these species that might not actually have access to arable land, because it's quite a built up area. So really nice site to work on. Sorry, go over to this one. In terms of the other species, so with spreading hedge parsley, we sowed at a site in Somerset in 2019, and we had over 400 plants germinate there, so that was really successful. We were really pleased to see that. And then over in Surrey, we sowed red hemp nettle and broadleaf cudweed into 2 different sites on the same farm. The red hemp nettle was a fantastic success. We had 467 plants pop up there, which was really nice. And I should also mention that actually these surveys, the surveys were carried out by some really dedicated volunteers, because I wasn't able to go over to Surrey this year. I wasn't able to travel over there. And they also literally searched on their hands and knees for broadleaf cudweed and found 4 plants. So although that may not sound like a success, I think getting any germination from broadleaf cudweed is a success. So I think we should view it as that. As Rob said, all these reintroductions really are just they are trials, because we're still learning so much about the requirements of these plants. Oh, and what tonight is really all about is to say thank you to all of our volunteers that have helped us do this. That we really couldn't have achieved what we have through this project without all the help that we've had from our amazing volunteers. So I've been really lucky to work with some fantastic people through this project who have not been scared to get involved in all the things that we've done, from surveys, the reintroductions to seed collections. Out in all weathers, we had some uncharacteristically sunny weather for reintroductions this year, as you can see by the bottom photo there. It's not always been that way. And we have also incurred some discomfort carrying out some of the work that we've been doing. So in the seed collections, there's been a lot of backache and eye strain involved in seed collection. And I feel that this, I must mention here that between 2018 2020, volunteers have hand collected 250,000 seeds from 5 head arable fields for us to use. These have either gone into collections in the Millennium Seed Bank, or they've been freshly sown on some of our sites, and that's involved 30 days of volunteer time, and that is a job that I most definitely would not have done without your help. So a massive thank you from me for all your help. We really couldn't have done it without you. And also, like Rob, had to get in a few other species at the end here. We've been really lucky to come across some lots of cool stuff other than arable plants when we've been surveying. And the top there you can see a harvest mouse nest. That was our first record for 5-head arable fields. It's lovely. Volunteers have sent me lovely photos of predatory beetles. It's exactly what we want to be showcasing, and some lovely black-tailed skimmers flying around the fields as we've been surveying. So yes, thank you to our volunteers. It's been a really lovely experience for me as well.
Has anyone got any questions for Alison?
There are a couple in the chat.
Yeah, I've just seen. So, how did we recruit our volunteers? We recruited them for a variety of different ways. As outreach officer, I was advertising a lot of the volunteering opportunities either on our Back from the Brink website, through other external organisations like Nature Volunteers, and newsletters, and a lot of the sites that we did some work on as well when we had events for open farm days and seed collections and things like that. People wanted to find out more about the project and stayed on board that way. Ali, Hannah, Rob, any other ways we've been able to get hold of our volunteers?
Well, I was just going to say that actually it's been even more fantastic that we've had so much volunteer help on this project, because so many sort of botanically minded volunteers have been contributing towards the 2020 Atlas, and so they've already got a lot on their plate. So it's been, we're really grateful for people who've been able to do both. But now that that's finished, hopefully people will be a bit more freed up in terms of volunteer time.
I can send you an email, Tracy, as well, with regards to your questions of where we've been posting our volunteer opportunities, if that would be helpful. Got one other question as well. So how long will a no cropping stray last? Anyone? Have you lost me?
The first question, did the management plans include cropping or just fallow and weeds? I think that depends on the site. So some sites are fallow plots, and some reintroduction sites that I've worked on, we've actually sown seeds on the edge of like a spring barley field. So I think it's probably dependent on the site for that first question. I'm not sure what the second question means. Do you know what that means, Rob?
No, maybe Peter wants to ask it in person rather than writing it in.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the balance between and I've done some volunteer monitoring at Langley Vale, the farm, in 2019. Alison, I couldn't do it this year, but I mean, one of the big problems there is the site has been taken over by barren brome, bristly oxton and thistles, so it's very difficult to, well, it makes it very difficult to monitor, but it's actually not very good competition for the beneficial weeds. So I'm just wondering if having a no cropping strategy is always the best policy, and you know, or are there other ways of taking out unrequired species?
I've got a sort of half an answer. one of the farms that I was working at over the course of the project had a fallow area for arable plants, which had become quite heavily burdened with sterile brome and a couple of other we what about you guys?
So I guess there's the added issue as well with Langley Vale Wood, because it's not kind of a working farm anymore. It's now a reserve, and there are other reserves that we work with that have shown that actually that crops can come at a loss. So there's that difficulty, I guess, as well, of balancing it. At 5 head arable fields, the decision was taken to stop cropping the fields and give it over completely to arable, because the crops were coming at a loss. And from then, it's been this kind of tweaking of management to stay on top of the more kind of problem species. But there's no kind of, well, we certainly at 5 heads haven't found a solution to it. It tends to be a tweaking each year to try and get on top of some of these species.
Brilliant. We've got some time for questions at the end as well. So if Hannah, do you want to do your presentation next?
Yeah, sure. I'll just do the sharey thing. Okay. Can everybody see that?
I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Good to go. Cool. So my name's Hannah, and I've been working in Devon and Cornwall on the Colour in the Margins project since 2018. So just like Rob and Ali. This is one of probably my favourite sites in Devon. This particular photograph was taken at a site near Dartmouth. And when I first visited this site in 2018, it was a conventional winter wheat crop, and this cultivated margin wasn't in place. And it was a historical site for broad-fruited corn salad, and there was nothing there really. The crop just kind of came right up to the edge where all of this wild oat is, and there wasn't anything of any interest. And the farmer was quite keen to tweak management, and he put in a cultivated margin. And so when I went back in 2019, had this incredibly colourful margin, which was really nice. So lots of poppy and corn marigold, but in amongst there was like tens of thousands of broad-fruited corn salad plants as well, which was really, really cool. It wasn't quite what I was expecting, so I was really amazed by that. So this is another example, I guess, of tweaking management and how you can get a really quick, amazing outcome. And I think that's one of the real benefits of arable plants, is that you can, in the right location, you can change management a little bit, and you can create a really wonderful habitat for all the species that have already been mentioned, so farmland birds and invertebrates and various other things. So I think it's a real win-win. I've been massively brought into the fold, I guess. I really love arable plants. I really think the habitat that you find in arable fields can be amazing. It's not always boring at all. So there are 3 main species that I've been kind of working on in Devon and Cornwall. The first is small-flowered catchfly. This species is in the campion family. It's I guess it looks a little bit like white campion, but it's a lot smaller, a bit more subtle, and it's got sticky hairs on the plant, so it's got quite a characteristically kind of sticky feel. And as you can see on the map to the right, it's got quite a strong southwest distribution. There's obviously a population in quite a big population in southwest Wales and in East Anglia, but Devon, Cornwall and Dorset is a real kind of stronghold, and also the Isles of Scilly too. So if I just kind of zoom into Devon and Cornwall, you can see that a lot of the records are quite coastal, and on this map, the brighter the red colour, the more recent the record, and the paler kind of fleshy beigey colours are older records. So you can see that actually there were quite a lot of records throughout Devon and Cornwall, and they've become a little bit more kind of coastally focused, I suppose, in the recent decades. The second species that I focused on is broad-fruited cornsalad. So this is one of the 5 cornsalad species that we have in the UK, and it's quite characteristically kind of identifiable by the presence of these kind of inflated seed pods. The cornsalad plants look very, very similar actually until they come in seed, so you have to survey them at a particular time of year. So the distribution of this particular species, as you can see, is a little bit more sparse on a UK scale than small-flowered catchfly. Again, you can see a lot of older kind of beigey flesh-coloured records showing that it was more widely distributed in the past, and the red dots have become a bit more kind of sparse. So if we zoom into Devon and Cornwall again, you can see there's just a couple of more recent records, but there's a lot of older records. And one of the main kind of tasks, I guess, when we first started this project was identifying all of the historical records and trying to gain access to as many of those sites as possible to see if we could find if those sites are still kind of viable, whether those populations are still viable or not. And a third species that I kind of wasn't really aiming to work on, but is corn buttercup. One of many species of buttercup they have in the UK. It's got these really cool characteristic seed pods that are really spiky, but the flower itself looks quite kind of, classically buttercup-like. And again, if you look at the distribution map, you can see that it's got quite a southeasterly distribution. And then again, when we zoom into Devon and Cornwall, there's a couple of recent records, but on the whole, the records are quite old, from like the 1970s, 80s and older. So again, this species has kind of experienced a decline over the last few decades. So over the last 3 years, 60 different holdings in Devon and Cornwall have been visited by me and the volunteers that have been providing some help on the project. As you can see, the majority of the sites have been visited in South Devon. There's a cluster of sites that I visited around Exeter, yet the vast majority of the sites have actually been in Cornwall. There's one kind of inland site near Launceston, and then the majority of the sites are kind of along this North Devon coast, so kind of either side of Newquay, a couple down towards Land's End, and then a good collection down at the Lizard, and then also Roseland. And I guess these sites are kind of, these really are the main kind of hotspots for arable plants in Devon and Cornwall, and that's why I was kind of focusing on these areas. And although 60 different holdings have been visited, quite a few of those holdings have actually been visited on different occasions. So there's a number of sites that I've been to 3 years in a row, for example. I think it's also probably worth mentioning that the vast majority of the soil on which these sites kind of lie is slightly acidic and quite sandy, and the species that I've been working on are quite characteristic of those soil types. This is a photo just to kind of rub it in really to Rob and Ali, because I've been really fortunate. I've been hanging out near the beach actually for the last 3 years, which has been quite nice. This photo kind of makes it look all glorious, and often it really is very nice. But yeah, it can be pretty gotty when the sea mist comes in and it's windy and horrible. But yeah, I just thought I'd just rub it into those guys a little bit. Sorry, chaps. And of the 60 holdings that have been visited, 20 were found to support our primary species. So those 10 species that Zoe mentioned at the start, 20 were found to actually support those species. So I've been to one farm that has corn buttercup just on the edge of Dartmoor. This is one of 2 sites supporting this species in Devon and Cornwall at the moment. So it's looking pretty sad for that species at the moment. Found 2 populations of broad-fruited cornsalad. So again, that is quite a sad kind of outcome, I guess, because I've been to lots and lots of sites with historical records of that species, but I haven't found it anywhere apart from these 2 sites. So that's pretty sad. So one site near Dartmouth, that's in fact the photograph that I showed you right at the beginning, and then a National Trust site up near Polzeath is the other site. So yeah, it's again a bit kind of depressing on the broad-fruited cornsalad front, but as a positive, small-flowered catchfly populations seem to actually be doing okay at the moment. So 17 farms visited support small-flowered catchfly populations, a nice cluster down in South Devon. One site, an inland site in Launceston, which is an organic farm, which has tens of thousands of plants, which is great. And then a really kind of interesting kind of sweep of sites on the North Cornwall coast. So yeah, that species is actually not necessarily doing quite as badly as we thought it might be. So that's really good news. So just like the other guys, I've been involved in lots of reintroductions. So we've been getting seeds from the Kew Millennium Seed Bank. Kew initially told us that we had 100,000 seeds, I think. So for the first year, I was like really kind of planning which sites I was going to go to, needed to make sure that they were like really good sites for the reintroductions. And then we found out like 6 months later that they'd forgotten to, and they'd left like a 0 off the end of that total figure. So I actually had absolutely tons of seeds to try and get rid of. So yeah, I've been really trying to work with as many people as possible really to try and introduce small-flowered catchfly. And here are some photos of some people that have helped with the reintroductions. Lots of National Trust sites have been involved. Dawlish Countryside Park is another great site in Devon that have worked with us and done a reintroduction. And these silver kind of foil packets are what Kew tend to send the seeds out in, so that we can keep them in the fridge and keep the seeds fresh, so that they're kind of ready to go as soon as we're ready to spread the seeds. So I've been involved in 3 introductions of broad-fruited cornsalad, 2 in South Devon and 1 in Cornwall, and at those sites I've sowed 10,000 seeds, so that's been pretty good. And then for small-flowered catchfly, I've actually sown 300,000 seeds, which is quite a huge number actually, and that's been carried out at 22 fields and 12 holdings. And as you can see from this map, it's actually quite a broad variety of locations where those seeds have been spread, so hopefully they'll be successful in the long term. So in terms of kind of results, one site down in Cornwall at West Pentire, I've only just put those seeds out, so I have no idea what's going on down there. And in the summer, I'll kind of find out how successful it was. That's a National Trust farm. And then this year, at one site, only 1 plant came up from 2,500 seeds, and at another site, 5 plants came up from 2,500 seeds. So I guess for the broad-fruited cornsalad, it doesn't necessarily look like the germination rate is particularly high. It's worth mentioning actually that we put the seeds down on average, put 100 seeds per metre square. So usually for the reintroduction sites, we're not spreading seeds, throughout a whole field, but we're spreading seeds within a kind of given plot within that field. So for example, on the whole, tend to kind of put out say 200,000 seeds of the small-flowered catchfly, so that would cover 200 metres squared. So it's actually quite a small plot within a larger field. And small flowered catchfly has been really successful. So this year, over 2,500 plants have been found in total throughout Devon and Cornwall at the reintroduction sites. So that's been really good. There's been a couple of sites where we've had not such a good show. So at a site down at near Plymouth at Wembury Point, I sowed a whole load of seeds down there last year, and last summer nothing came up, and I think that was just because the weather was particularly dry and hot, and they hardly got any rain from the time that the seeds were sown up until me visiting to see if anything come up. So I think those really dry hot springs we're getting actually might not necessarily work for certain sites and certain species. And another site here at just outside of Exeter, the first year I got 50 plants come up, and then this year I've got nothing. And I have a feeling that at that particular site it was cultivated a bit later in the year. It was cultivated in May. And also it's got a lot of corn marigold at that site, and corn marigold and small flower catchfly don't tend to, they like living in the same kind of habitat, but when the corn marigold's really dense, the small flower catchfly doesn't tend to kind of do very well. It likes open vegetation, as actually a lot of the arable plants that I've been working with, they quite like open vegetation and they don't like too much competition. And it's worth mentioning that the site so far that kind of wins the award for best reintroduction for small flower catchfly is Windmill Farm down in Cornwall, and this is owned by the Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and they had 1,300 plants come up this year, which is really great. I was really lucky actually for a lot of the reintroductions this year. I wasn't able to go and travel obviously because of the lockdown, but we were able to send seeds out to farmers, and this farm, for example, although it's a reserve owned by the Cornwall Wildlife Trust, the tenant farmer was really happy to go and spread the seeds out, so he did that, and yeah, he's got greener fingers than me because that was the most successful reintroduction so far, so that was really good. So yeah, if you're ever down in the Lizard, Windmill Farm is accessible, and you can pop in and have a look at the reintroduction that we've got going on down there, which is pretty cool. So yeah, initially I'd like to say thank you to any of the landowners or land managers or farmers, if any of you guys are actually online, just to initially say thank you for letting us actually access your farm, because without that we wouldn't have done anything. And so it's been really great. I've been so overwhelmed with the number of people who are just allowing us to traipse around the farm and see what we can find, but we're also keen on kind of like taking on some of the management advice that we've been suggesting, and also a huge number of people have been involved and wanting to get involved with the reintroduction. So a massive thank you to anybody who's any farmers or land managers and owners, and also to the volunteers. In Devon and Cornwall, I've really enjoyed getting to know everybody. I've learned a huge amount from people. I've had a huge variety of people who have kind of got involved with the project. Some people who didn't really know anything about arable plants, and then other people who are really experienced. So it's been really great to learn from people, but also being involved in the learning process of somebody else too. So I've really enjoyed that, and I really hope that we can kind of keep working together for a bit longer. So yeah, thanks very much. And I asked a couple of the volunteers down in Cornwall if they'd be interested in just kind of giving a bit of feedback in terms of how they have enjoyed or not their involvement with colouring the margins, and out on a survey they did a little recording for me, which was pretty cool. So I'm just going to click on to play Phil and Eileen's video, and hopefully it'll work.
This is our final survey for colour in the margins, and we're feeling a little sad and wistful about it. We're here near the beautiful Helford River in Cornwall, looking for small flowered catchfly, and so far we haven't found any. But
which is par for the course. Like 7 times out of 8, you don't find what you're looking for, and on the 8th time, it's brilliant.
And then you do. And we are so grateful to Colour in the Margins for giving us the opportunity to do this kind of a project. It's been an amazing learning experience. We knew about garden flowers, but nothing about arable plants. And working with Hannah has been absolutely amazing. Her patience, her inspiration, and her enthusiasm. We have certainly learned as much as we could have imagined and more. So thank you, Hannah.
And you kept us sane during lockdown. It's been marvellous. Thank you. So I hope there's some way this project can continue in some form after this. If not, it's been wonderful while it lasted. So thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Hopefully that worked. Did it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of wanted to get rid of a little bit of the end, but it was really nice that they enjoyed the project and being involved with it all. And also it was quite cool, really, because they were so excited because they kept going out to sites and not finding anything. Well, not finding the particular species that they were hoping to find, and I felt awful because I kept sending them out to these different sites, and then when they eventually found small flowered catchfly, they were absolutely over the moon, and they went home and had a G&T to celebrate and text me to say that they'd found it, and it was really nice. So I was just pleased that they that they enjoyed it. So that was good, and I finished.
Thank you, Hannah. And we've had one question. Have you tried planting as plugs rather than seed?
No, and I don't exactly know why, but somebody did tell me once. I don't know if this is the reason why we haven't done this, but somebody said that annuals don't tend to do so well as plugs as perennials, and because we're working with annuals, they might be a bit susceptible to that, but I'm not sure. And I guess in terms of trying to get huge numbers out, it kind of makes sense to sow seeds, but also as we're kind of hoping for those plants to keep going, if they don't work the first time, then they're not going to work for the long term. So if the seeds the seed method works and then they grow more seeds and then those seeds kind of continue the spiral, I guess, like, I don't know, that's my thoughts. But Ali, do you know why we wouldn't have plug planted other than labour intensiveness?
Well, that would be my reason for it. The kind of labour intensive element of it, I think, is a main factor.
Yeah.
Okay.
A big percentage take up out of the landowners that were approached, and what reasons given by landowners not willing to take part. I would say most of the landowners I've contacted have actually allowed me to access land. And I guess some people are a little bit hesitant because they don't want any additional restriction placed on their farm, I suppose. But on the whole, most people have been totally fine about access. I would say probably only like 2 or 3 people out of 100 would say no.
I think we did. I've been doing evaluation calls with farmers and landowners and advisors, and we will hopefully have those actual figures by the end of that evaluation, and if there were any barriers, they would also be documented as well. But as from the conversations I've had, as Ali, Hannah and Rob have said, most have been incredibly willing and really, really helpful for their entire process.
Lucy's written, did someone have to give permission for the reintroductions? And that's definitely, for all the reintroductions, we wrote management plans, we chatted a lot with the landowners and land managers, and everybody kind of had to sign the agreement to say that they were happy for that reintroduction to go ahead. Yeah, we kind of had to make sure that everybody was totally happy with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done it, because it has to, I guess the reintroduction has to be sustainable. And if not everybody's 100% happy with it, then it might not be.
Yeah. Will you be able to continue to survey the reintroduction sites? So this kind of ties in with the project and the future of the project, in that we have just received funding confirmation that we're able to run Colour in the Margins until August of 2021, which is great news, which we weren't expecting. So it was lovely to hear that. I suppose, Hannah and Ali, over to you in terms of surveying for reintroductions.
So that is what our work will be focused on for the rest of the project. is returning to these reintroduction sites, and especially as some of them were actually only sown this year. So we'll actually go back and check them and see how successful they've been. So that's really great news.
Which I think ties into Peter's question there, saying there's a good chance of getting germination in a year or two after sowing. So I suppose the combination of the resurveying will be able to see the successes there.
There is a comment, sorry, that I just noticed about stewardship schemes in the questions. Obviously, reintroductions, where reintroductions took place at a site which was under a stewardship scheme, that any management that took place there had to fit in with the management that they would be ordinarily carrying out as part of their stewardship scheme. Yeah, so we couldn't be advising that farms do anything that went against their agreement, obviously.
And that did act as a positive as well for us, that I selected a couple of sites based on that, because I knew that they were already in stewardship and carrying out the right management for the species in question. So it worked really well.
Yeah.
So just we'll wrap up quickly with the answers to the quiz questions, see how many you guys have correctly guessed. Sorry, my cat's just trying to get involved. Okay, so how many farms have we worked with? We worked with, oh, now my PowerPoint's not working. Bear with me a second. 105 farms in total, and so we think that's really good total there. Sorry, my cat keeps on running in front. We've how many volunteers have helped us? We've been helped by 100 wonderful volunteers on this project, so thank you again to everybody that has helped us there. Oh, sorry. Can you see my screen or not? Is it not shared?
No.
Sorry, it was
nice to end in such a comedy way.
Yes. There we go. So let's try that again. Really? Come on. Yeah, so we've had 100 volunteers that have helped us. And we have done 34 reintroductions in total, but obviously the numbers of plants that have been successful at these sites way exceeds that, which is fantastic. And we have sown 770,000 seeds over the course of the project, which I think is a fantastic number. So yeah, those are the answers to the quiz questions. So hopefully you all got some of those right. And when it comes to the future of the project, we've talked a little bit about what's happening. So we have been able to get the funding till August 2021. Myself and Rob are finishing on the project at the end of this year, so won't be in. We're working on the project next year, unfortunately, but Ali and Hannah are. But Rob is still going to be involved in some capacity, aren't you, Rob?
Yes, I will still be around, and so I'll hopefully be able to catch up with everyone next year, and be more than willing to help out with the project going forwards, in a volunteer capacity, maybe myself.
So
has anybody got any last questions before we say thanks again and sign off?
I might just answer Lucy's question. She said in terms of permissions, whether we had to get a government body permission to do the reintroductions, and that is, we haven't had to speak to anybody in that kind of vein. I guess we kind of had to talk before our project officially started. I think there were quite a lot of discussions with local recording groups to make sure that they were kind of happy with us doing reintroductions of the right species in the right place. But other than that, I don't think we actually had to speak to Natural England or anything, not that I'm aware of, unless again that happened prior to the project actually happening properly. But yeah, we didn't necessarily have to speak to anybody else about reintroductions.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. It's just I find it quite interesting having watched the BSBI AGM the other night, and so many people are so concerned about the pros and cons of sowing wildflower mixtures. and whether they come from native or non-native species, and so on and so forth. I'd really like to start a discussion about sowing arable seeds more widely, and for me, I think that it would be splendid to start being a guerrilla arable weed seed sower, and I am minded to do so. Thank you.
Did they mention arable plants at that AGM, or was it?
No, not really. Only except when they are in the wildflower mixtures, which contain arable seeds and turn into more of a pictorial meadow rather than a wildflower mixture. And that was the only time they were mentioned.
Okay.
And then it was generally considered to be more of an urban arrangement rather than a wildflower meadow arrangement. This is probably a discussion for another time, but it's something that's very dear to me.
Cool. Well, if no one's got any other questions, it just leaves us to say thank you again so much for being part of the project in any way that you have been, and also joining us this evening to share the successes we've had across the project. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Cheers.